Hi, this is Chris Converse, and in this episode, we'll take a look at how nesting techniques in less can reduce the amount of CSS you need to initially write. In CSS, writing specific selectors requires that you repeat those selector names quite a few times, once for each rule in fact. Less allows us to nest selectors when writing our CSS, and once compiled, the resulting CSS will contain the more verbose rules required by a browser. Now, we covered a similar technique in a previous episode using Sass instead of less. So if you'd like to follow along with me, download the exercise files, get your preprocessor software ready, and let's begin by exploring what's in the exercise files. So in the exercise files, there's an index.html file. This file links to the style.css file, and this file is compiled from the less file here. And for my preprocessor, I'm using a piece of software called CodeKit. So this CodeKit file here will not be included in your files, unless of course you're going to be using CodeKit. And you can use any less preprocessor that you want to follow along. So to begin, let's come down and select index.html, and let's open this in a text editor. So once you have the file open, up in the head area, you'll see that I am referencing the style.css file. Down in the body area, we have a header and an article element. The article has three asides, one for windmills, one for museums, and one for canals. And it's these aside elements that we're going to be floating into columns. So we'll use nested techniques in less to reduce the amount of CSS we would need to write to create these columns. And if you'd like to see the layout we're going to be starting with, you can open index.html in a browser, so you can see those three aside elements showing up here. And now to begin working on our layout, let's go back to the exercise files. Let's find style.less. Let's open this in our text editor. And now in my particular text editor, I can split the screen and show two documents. So what I'm going to do is go back to the exercise files and open the style.css file in my window on the right. This way I can see the result of the less file being compiled into CSS. And now in the less file, let's scroll down to the bottom. I added a CSS comment down here for where we're going to be adding our nesting. So after this comment, let's come in here and first target the article element. So we'll type in article, then a space, add in our brackets. Let's split this open. And now inside of the article selector, we're going to add another selector for the aside. So I'm going to hit tab to keep this nicely formatted. Let's type aside, put in our beginning and ending brackets. Next, let's split open the brackets for the aside. And now inside of the aside selector, let's come in here and set the width to 33%. On the next line, let's set a float property. We're going to set the float to left. Next, we'll set box sizing. We'll set this to border box. And then finally, let's come in and add padding. So for the padding, we're going to set 15 pixels on the top, 30 pixels on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. So at this point, I'll hit save. My pre-processing software will convert the less file into CSS. And now I'll come over here to the CSS file, scroll down to the bottom, and I can see that my nested rule was converted into article space aside. So now with that working properly, let's go back to our less file, and I want to target the H2 elements that are inside of the aside element. So after the padding property, still inside of the aside selector, let's hit a few returns, and let's add another selector for an H2. So we'll type H2, then a space, then put in our brackets. Let's split these open. And inside of the H2 selector, let's add some properties. So first we'll set text transform. We'll set this to uppercase. Next line we'll set letter spacing. We're going to set this to 5 pixels. Next line we're going to set a padding property. We're going to set the padding to 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 8 pixels on the bottom, and 0 on the left. And then finally we're going to set a border bottom property. So border dash bottom. Size is 1 pixel, style is solid, and we're going to use the RGBA color space. So RGBA, put in our parentheses. We're going to use 0 for red, 0 for green, 0 for blue, and 0.2 for the alpha. I'll just scroll up here a little bit. Now after the H2, but still inside of the aside selector, let's come in here and target the paragraph elements. So we'll type a P, then a space, put in our brackets. Inside of the P selector, we're going to come in here and set the font size. We're going to set this to 0.9 ems, semicolon. After the paragraph selector, let's come in here and target the images that are inside of the aside. So we'll type img, put in our brackets. Again, split this open. And for the images, we're going to set a height property of 4.4 ems. Next, we'll set a float property of left. And then finally, we'll set a margin property. We're going to set 5 pixels on the top, 13 pixels on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. So with these in place, I'll hit save. Over in the CSS file, let's scroll down. And we can see all of the specific CSS rules that have been generated from that less file. So now we'll go back to the browser, I'll hit reload, and now we can see all of those aside elements are now being converted into columns. So when looking at the final compiled CSS file, the amount of code generated by less exceeds the amount of code that we actually had to type into the less file. Now if you'd like to learn more about using less and Sass, I'd recommend taking a look at Joe Marini's course entitled CSS with Less and Sass, which is also available here in the library. And so with that, I'll conclude this episode, and as always, thanks for watching.